Hey, what's good, everybody? My name is Polo. Hope you're doing well. And today I have somewhat of a hot button topic for you guys, all right? And if you're sensitive to hot button topics, then this may not be the video for you. And before we get into the Thomas Sowell reaction that I'm getting ready to do, I want to lead you guys along to how I got here, how I got to this video. It wasn't just a random video. This is actually a video I'm watching for more selfish reasons, for my own sake, to learn, okay? Here goes. All right. So I was listening to a podcast, and in the podcast, it stated that Black people were the #1 victims of hate crimes today. Do you agree with that statement, that Black people are the #1 victims of hate crimes? Curious to know. Now, this is a podcast that I listen to from time to time, and it's been a long time since I checked in on, I'm not going to say the name of the podcast. And I typically only agree with the podcast about 60% of the time, you know, and in this specific case, I didn't really agree with that statement. And I'm going to tell you guys why. Do I think that Black people are the #1 victims of hate crimes in 2025? No. Do I think that we are the #1 victims of hate crimes historically in America? Absolutely. Us and the Native Americans. So, you know, and then a lot of those things have a domino effect when you push up further, you know, when you go to the 90s and the 80s, as far as the empowerment of the Black woman and the mass incarceration of the Black man, okay, where so many benefits and safety nets were in place for the women. And also those women were incentivized to not be married, to not be in a relationship with Black men. Guns, drugs, and things like that were flooded into the community. Crack, which got a bunch of Black people addicted to that drug. Most of my family, and they made crack illegal instead of like treating it as what it is. You know, like helping people get off the drug. And I don't think that if someone has a crack addiction, that they should be locked up in prison. But that was the case. You know, the mass incarceration thing going on. That's a whole different thing. So that resulted in a bunch of young boys being raised in single mother households. And in my opinion, it's going to be tough for that young boy to become a man if he's never seen one. So in result, I mean, as far as that, that I would say that that's the biggest issue that's happened with the Black community. You know, no male leadership, no structure. The family unit is decimated. I don't think that it can be, you know what, I'm not going to go that far, but let me go ahead and continue with the video as far as what I found, because I paused that video that said that Black people were the #1 victims of hate crimes. And I looked on Google, I looked on ChatGPT, I wanted to know what the numbers were and what constitutes as a hate crime. You know, are people saying mean words to someone, you know, or is it something that's really inflicting trauma on people, trauma, or even worse, death? Okay. What I found was pretty interesting. Okay. And we're going to get to the video here shortly. All right. So I typed it in Google. I didn't get much information. I want to know some statistics, because the first number that I got as far as how many hate crimes are done towards Black people, it was, let me scroll up here. It was 11,862 crimes nationwide. All right. In 2023 alone, 11,862 hate crimes. Okay. And I'm like, damn, that's a big number. 11,000 for 1 year. That's a big number. 11,862 hate crime incidents nationwide. So I was like, well, give me 50 examples. That should be easy. All right. Just in 2024 alone, I wanted 50 examples of Black people who were victims of hate crimes. And what I found was fascinating. And I want to know your guys' thoughts on this one. Here he goes. In 2024, numerous hate crimes in the United States tragically resulted in the loss of life. Below is a list of 50 documented incidents from that year. January 1st, 2024, Las Vegas, Nevada. Sasha Williams, a 36-year-old transgender woman, was fatally stabbed a suspect was arrested and charged with her murder. January 2nd, 2024, Santurce, Puerto Rico. I think that's how you pronounce that. I'm not going to say the name because I can't pronounce it, but 25-year-old transgender woman was shot multiple times and killed. Authorities are investigating the incident as a hate crime. February 2nd, 2024, Tampa, Florida, John Walter Lay, a 52-year-old gay man, was shot while walking his dog. The suspect claims self-defense, but prosecutors are pursuing hate crime charges. You guys see where I'm going with this? I'm not going to read the whole list, but I just want to give you guys the theme of what artificial intelligence pulled up when I wanted to know cases of just regular, everyday black people being victims of hate crimes. All right. February 7th, 2024, Owasso, Oklahoma. Next Benedict, a 16-year-old non-binary, I don't even know what that means. A 16-year-old non-binary student was beaten in school restroom and later died from their injuries. The assault is being investigated as a hate crime. Now, I'm gonna read one more before we get to the video, but I want to tell you guys what I think about this list, and I want to know what you guys think as well. February 7th, 2024, in Oklahoma. I think I read that one. February 26th, 2024, Renton, Washington. Reina Hernandez, a 54-year-old transgender woman, was missing and later found dead in Mexicali, Mexico. Her husband was arrested in connection with her murder. Do you guys see something wrong with this list? I do. I see something wrong with this list. Okay. These are people who identify in the LGBTQ. All right. And it's tragic of what happened to these people. I don't have a bone in my body that hates anybody because of their preference, things of that nature. I don't agree with it being pushed on children and things of that nature. Your business is your business. Keep your business to yourself. When we find all these cliques and groups to identify with, it's just one more way that the powers that be keep us separated so that they can control us. That's my opinion. So I think even in this AI pulling, because I said, give me some hard facts of black people being victims of hate crimes, everyday black people. No offense, but the LGBTQ, they represent a small part of the population. And I noticed that ChatGPT and the LGBTQ has latched on to the history of the black struggle in America. Okay, the history of black people who were disenfranchised, and a lot of other, like Black Lives Matter, a lot of other people have also latched on to that struggle while not really caring anything about the black community or black people whatsoever, because Black Lives Matter hasn't done anything for black folks. That's an LGBTQ company that was built to enrich themselves by latching on to the black struggle. And other movements I can name as well, but that's a video for another day. So I thought that was pretty scary stuff, that this is the first thing that pops up on artificial intelligence, which shouldn't have any sort of agenda whatsoever. It should be talking about facts. And if you ask it for an opinion, then that's different. But, I just saw that and it gave me every list. Most of this list is transgender. 23. It stopped at 23. By the way, I said give me 50 examples in 2024 of hate crimes. It could only give me 23. Okay. And they were mostly trans and gay hate crimes, but the statistics were pushed into black people because they were black. And I don't know. What are your thoughts on that? Do you agree with this? Do you agree with this assessment? But I'm not going to hold you guys for too long. I just thought that was interesting because in my life, most of the trauma that was done to me was done by people who look like me. And I would argue that that's probably the case for most people, whether you're white, whether you're Asian, whether you're Indian, that if you think about the most harmful things that were done for you, that were done to you, if you grew up with your family, it's more likely going to be people that you live around, people who, that are in your surrounding area. That's my take on it. I could be wrong. You guys educate me in the comments section here. But let's go ahead. Let me see if I can find this video, because I pulled up this Thomas Sowell interview. I want to know what his opinion was on woke culture and how it originated, because the video that I'm reacting to is Thomas Sowell, The Origins of Woke. All right. Before we get started, if you like this type of content, these type of conversations, do me a big favor and like the video. I'm sorry if I'm long-winded on this one. I'm still working on being able to just talk to myself in an empty room. I'm talking to you guys, but in reality, I'm in a room talking to myself. But let's go ahead and get right into it.
That's an interesting title. Who are the anointed?
They are the elite in the media, in politics. All of those who think that third parties ought to be making people's decisions for them. The subtitle is Self-Congratulation as a Basis for Social Policy. In other words, people who think that everything that's wrong with the country is due to the fact that other people are just not as smart as they are. And if only they could, or people like them could take over and make our decisions, we'd be so much better off.
But in early America, didn't this sort of educated class make the decisions for everybody?
As far as governmental decisions,
yeah.
But the government itself didn't make the decisions for everyone.
Uh-huh.
Now, you can't decide where your kid's going to school. You can't decide whether or not they can move a halfway house for drug users next door to you or whatnot.
It's out of your control. The government decides that.
That's right.
Stuff.
The government decides too many things. They decide also how your children will be raised. You may have an idea about at what age children should be introduced to sex, and in what manner, with what kind of moral commitments.
You mean as a parent?
A parent, yes.
And this is an issue that I have this is a topic I have a major issue. I think that schools should only deal with facts and maybe the economy, things of that nature. When it comes to religion or certain topics you don't want brought up to your kids, certain things you don't want your kids taught until their mind is developed enough to understand what's going on, it's a major violation, in my opinion, in terms of American schooling. So I agree with Thomas Sowell here.
The schools have taken that over. By the time you even think about it, they've already had years, of showing.
They're passing out condoms to these kids.
Passing out condoms is not even the half of it. They're showing motion pictures of naked couples engaging in sex, both homosexual and heterosexual, in the 7th grade. And if you complain about it, that's considered to be censorship.
You can't pull your kid out of school and say they don't have to put up with this stuff.
I remember when I was in a class called home ec, right? And the thing the boys couldn't wait to get to was we were getting ready to see a woman give birth, all right? But we were going to get to see her naked, all right? Boys from my generation in my school, we were pervs, so we all sat at the front of the class. And we knew for a second we were going to get to see a naked woman, right? And it was the most traumatizing thing I had ever seen, all right? I really regret sitting at the front of the classroom, all right? Because I'm a squeamish type of person, all right? But I don't remember what grade this was in. I want to say it was the 6th grade, 7th grade. I can't remember. But, I would have rather not have seen that. But things have gotten apparently even crazier than that, because childbirth is something that does happen. And I think that we should be educated. But I think that should be something that should be left up to the parents.
I guess you could, but you'd be...
Well, if you have a private school to put him in, but you have compulsory attendance laws, and if you don't have the money for private schools, then you're stuck.
Where did this country get off the track and decide that the federal government should make most of our decisions?
Well, it started to some extent in the New Deal, but I think the 1960s is sort of the golden age, if you want to put it that way, of this whole mindset. And that's what the book's about. It's about a mindset. It's not about a series of policies, but of showing how in policy after policy, those who think a certain way will try to take over other people's decisions.
How do you characterize the liberal philosophy today from the conservative philosophy?
Oh, that's a tough one. I guess the main thing about the liberals, again, is that they think a program will do it. If there's something that they don't like in the society, you have set up a program and that will solve the problem. I think one of the words they use a lot is solutions. And I argue here and elsewhere that there are no solutions. There are just trade-offs. So, for example, when Ralph Nader launched his attack against the Corvair many years ago, he said it's an unsafe car and it has these safety problems and those safety problems. And in some respects, he was correct, not all. But the fact is, there were other things that a Corvair would do that made it safer than other cars. And on net balance, it was as safe as the rest of them.
Are you saying there are no solutions to our problems as Americans?
There are no solutions to anybody's problems. There are trade-offs. You know, safety is a classic example. Every year, so many hundreds of thousands of people are vaccinated against measles, smallpox, those kinds of things. Now, this saves several hundred lives, it's estimated. It also causes brain damage to about 30 kids a year.
It does.
Now, there are no solutions in that. There are just trade-offs.
What about crime? Take crime as an issue.
I like that. There's no solutions. And I think that a lot of Americans, even today with all the problems we have, we are more fix our problem based in our mindset versus looking at it from the perspective of, all right, we have to do this, but there's going to be a trade-off in order to fix it. I don't think that is the thought process for today.
Can we solve the crime issue, or fundamentally solve it so it's reduced?
Well, then that's a trade-off. You don't solve it. There will always be crime. There always has been, but you want to keep it down to some level. It's not this astronomical thing we have today. For example, the liberals right now are saying, crime has eased off in New York, and that's true. There were 6 times as much crime in New York a few years ago as there was in 1960. Now it's down to 5 times as much crime as there was in 1960. Now that's not what I regard as a great trend, unless it continues a lot more sharply.
The liberals think we need more education, and we need to help people in the inner city more to cut down crime there. Conservatives would say we have to be tougher on crime. Is either of them correct?
I no. You see, the conservative view is really not a solution. It's a trade-off. It says, yes, it would be wonderful if we could do all these things to prevent crime in the first place. We just don't happen to be that smart. And so what we do, we put people behind bars who commit violent crimes. Now, a few years ago in East Palo Alto, which is not far from Stanford University, a minority community, low income, they had the doubtful distinction of being the murder capital of the United States in proportion to their population. The next year, murder and all sorts of other violent crimes dropped tremendous amount, 30, 40, 50% in 1 year. Now, that wasn't because they discovered the root causes of crime or because they worked out everything that was wonderful. They launched a campaign that put a lot of the bad guys behind bars. And when they were behind bars, they didn't commit as many crimes.
That makes sense to me.
And the thing
I do think we need to be tougher on crime, but I do think that our system in which we rehabilitate or so-called rehabilitate prisoners is one of the worst, because it's not. I don't know how effective it is. A lot of people. I remember the movie Shawshank Redemption. If you ever seen it, he I'm not going to. He went to prison, and I remember there was a quote he had in the movie. He said, I'm locked up in here and I'm innocent. He said, I had to go to prison to learn how to be a criminal. All right, and I think prison for a lot of people, statistically speaking, a lot of dudes who go in prison, they end up going right back. They're going right back. So it's not working. I think that discipline needs to be instilled. It should be a case where if you go to prison, it shouldn't be a case where you're just sitting in a room all day and just suffering. I think that these guys need to learn discipline. And a lot of times, the first discipline that they've ever received might be from prison. So I don't think, I don't have the mind to tell you exactly what needs to be done, but just locking people up in a cage and then leave them in there for 20 years, 30 years, and then letting them out, I don't know how effective that is, for the community. There's people that get out of prison and commit a crime within the first week or two. Okay. I have so many of those people in my family. So that's one issue I have that I would say I would disagree somewhat, and I would love to see his take on our prison systems, because I don't think that it's very effective.
Commit as many crimes.
Makes sense.
That's effective to me. I've never been to jail. All right. I don't have to go there to know it's a place that I don't want to go. I learn from other people's mistakes.
And the thing that it's even in a high crime area, the great majority of the people are not criminals. And so if you can just put your hands on those people who are raising all the hell in the community and take them out of circulation, the crime rate drops.
People say there's undue emphasis on African Americans for committing crimes. Is that true? Ed Koch wrote in a column here that the population is 25% African American in New York. 62% of the crimes are committed by African Americans. Is that and he says
I haven't checked these figures, but throughout the world, this is not unusual. Throughout the world, people are disproportionately represented in all kinds of different things, and it's true obviously in basketball. It's true in all kinds of other things. The main thing is not is not to keep people out of jail because they're one race or another, because when you do that, the people who are going to suffer the most will be the black community.
Where are you on affirmative action?
Against.
Why?
Well, you can only do one of two things. You can either just judge people individually, or you can judge them by groups. This whole notion.
See, I don't know why he didn't touch on the lack of fathers in homes. You know what I'm saying? When you see a lot of girls and you ask them why they didn't do certain things, a lot of times it's because they're like, man, my father would kill me if I did what some of these girls are out here doing. All right. You know, fathers and strong mothers, they implemented shame of the family and structure and ethics, morals, you know, and without the father in the home, you know, he's not touching on that. But that's a major issue because, you know, like men going to prison, that's more of, what's the word I'm looking for? When a lot of guys, black guys go to prison, that is a symptom. That's not the cause. And I like to focus on the cause.
Well, you can only do one of two things. You can either just judge people individually, or you can judge them by groups. This whole notion that you're going to come out with a compromise, I would defy anybody to come out with a compromise on that. You're going to do one of those two things. Now, you can pretend to be doing other things, but that's all you're going to do. Those are the only two choices you really have in the end. Again, the people who are the anointed think of this as a symbolic issue, and they want to be on the side of the angels. They don't ask, what are the consequences? Now, I've studied affirmative action programs around the world. One of the consequences is that those people who are more fortunate in the group that has the preferences, those people take the lion's share of the preferences. Very often, those at the other end of the scale, the poorer people, actually fall further behind. That's true of Blackshare. It's true of Malays in Malaysia. It's true of various groups in India. And there are reasons for that. You can say you must have certain proportion. Nothing is easier than for an employer who might otherwise locate, let's say, in the Bronx, to locate out in Provo, Utah, where he will be not near any black people, and therefore he will never have lawsuits, and the jobs will be in Provo, and people will wonder, why don't people, here have more jobs? It never seems to occur to liberals that other people are not blocks of wood, that when you set up certain incentives, they will react to them in certain ways. And when they do that, the result may be the opposite of what you set out to do.
How do the anointed refer to people they don't agree with?
All sorts of ways, but I think the main thing is they believe that you're not merely in error but in sin. In other words, they can't believe that you're just mistaken. You must have sold out. You must be something warped about you.
You guys are for the rich. You guys only care about the rich guys. Answer that. How do you respond? Liberal says conservatives only care about rich people.
Well, one of the things I go into in the book is that the whole notion of rich is ridiculous. That most Americans don't stay in the same income bracket, even for one decade. So the same guy who is, quote, rich now was 20 years ago probably in the bottom 20%. I mean, I was on a cruise recently, a luxury cruise, and the guy said, if someone had told me when I was growing up that I would end up on a cruise like this, I would have said, get real, man. That very few people are in that same income bracket the whole time. Right. The genuinely rich and the genuinely poor, I would estimate to be no more than 3% of the American people.
Really?
Put together.
Really?
Yes.
Genuinely poor. Now, I'm seeing numbers like when they were...
Now, this video's, it's an older video, so we have more statistics to show, probably, I'm pretty sure things have changed drastically since the recording of this video, but some of these things are probably still active today.
Yes.
Genuinely poor. Now, I'm seeing numbers like when they were talking about health care, they said, 30 million people couldn't afford it or something? That's
several million of those were making more than $50,000 a year. So it's not, see, this is one of the things the anointed do. They never believe that people make choices. There are people who have the money. They prefer to put that money into a BMW rather than a lot
of young people didn't want health care. They were betting on their health.
Absolutely. And then this allows them to buy more stuff they want to buy. So it's not a question that they couldn't afford it. It's a question they don't choose to spend the money.
What about mean-spirited? Conservatives are mean-spirited. They're bigots. They don't like people.
Well, one of the things I tell people say, you're a very tough person. I'm not tough. Life is tough. I'm merely trying to acquaint you with those facts.
Back in the 60s, Lyndon Johnson announced a war on poverty. Am I wrong? But there are more poor people. I mean, in other words...
Today than there were then, yes.
Yeah, there are more poor people.
Yes.
I mean, this was a hell of a war. We lost it, apparently, because for the last 30 years, we've been dumping money into these poverty programs.
Oh, absolutely.
Where's the money go?
Oh, it supports a whole industry of people who run those programs, who talk about those programs, research those programs, bureaucrats, and so on.
Doesn't help poor people.
No. The tragedy, you see, is that the anointed really want to make symbolic statements. And running these programs makes those symbolic statements. They don't really care if in the wake of affirmative action, for example, companies start locating away from minority communities so they don't get involved in legal action. They don't care about that. They've made their statement on the side of the angels, and that's what's important.
I will say that that is one thing I've noticed. And the number one person I've heard talk about this was Donald Trump in terms of companies outsourcing, for cheaper labor and not keeping their businesses within America for the American people. That's capitalism, which, I don't have an issue with. But I will say that he's one of the first people that talked about it, as well as Thomas Sowell here.
Have you ever debated Jesse Jackson?
No, I haven't.
Is that because, would you like to, or would he?
It would be a waste of his time.
He'd not want to do that.
I have no idea.
You'd be willing to, I assume.
Oh, maybe. I don't know.
You think that's too much showbiz?
It is. There are people who go out and do this, and I'm doing less and less of it. And I tell them the story of an African boxing champion who fought an Irishman in St. Patrick's Day in Dublin. And he lost his title on what the sports writers called a questionable decision.
Yes.
And so you have to know what forum you're talking about.
Right.
I saw Shelby Steele on with him, and I said, if Jesse Jackson and Shelby Steele each had to present a 2-hour lecture to an audience with an average IQ of 120, Shelby would wipe him out. But if they had 5 seconds each on Donahue, it would be Jesse Jackson all the way.
Right.
So everything.
Ooh. Wow. That's a really classy way of calling people who follow Jesse Jackson as stupid.
Depends upon the forum.
Is Jesse Jackson good for African Americans or not? He's not.
I was going to say misled, but no, he said IQ. I'll stick with it. Stupid.
For himself.
Good for himself.
Jackson all the way.
Right.
So everything depends upon the forum.
Is Jesse Jackson good for African Americans or not?
He's
not.
Good for himself.
Good for himself.
And that's
no leaders are good for African Americans. Leaders can be corrupted, and we see it all the time in politics with these social justice warriors. We see it with black people need a code of ethics, morals, things of that nature. They need a lot of other things, but the last thing they need is a leader. Every leader has either been assassinated or corrupted. So that's not a good idea.
That's true of most ethnic leaders in most groups, in most countries, in most periods of history. That what will serve his interest is to keep people paranoid, dependent upon him, dependent upon government. What will serve their interest is typically just the opposite.
That's pretty interesting. So you're saying that the leaders, whatever group, leader, wants the people to be poor and dependent on them as opposed to dependent on themselves.
Oh, absolutely. And you see this in the greatest cynicism in the academic world, where in many places, black organizations on campus have a say on who gets admitted. And they have turned down blacks with excellent credentials, both as students and as faculty members, for that very reason.
Who are the mascots of the anointed? You talk about the mascots of the anointed.
They're people whom they choose to back and whose rights are supposed to override other people's rights. The homeless are a classic example. I'm appalled when I see people out there in the street giving money to the home. Able-bodied men. I think one of the classic pictures to me was in San Francisco.
People have always thought I was somewhat mean for this. Like in my city, you'll see a bunch of people standing on a corner with a cardboard sign asking for money with a dog sitting next to them. And they'll stand there for 8 hours, and then people, and they mainly do this in they make their way out to like the suburbs or to really busy traffic areas, near my city. And I've always thought, I was like, man, if he stands there for 8 hours and begs for money, and he makes at least $60 an hour, $40 an hour, $30, he can go get a job. You're talking to someone who's worked a lot of jobs. Right? I've never crossed my mind to stand on the corner and ask for money. And then there's so many things on YouTube exposing these people a lot of them make more money than the people that are donating money to them. And it was like, well, you know, when I've heard people who give money to these people, they say, well, you know, God knows my heart and they're asking for it, so I'm going to give it to them. And I was like, you know, if I can genuinely see someone is mentally suffering or physically suffering where they're not able to take care of themselves, I don't have an issue with charity for people like that. But when I see people taking advantage of people's kindness, okay, because they are playing on it, and there's a whole ring of these people that do this all over the United States, where it's a lot of money just playing. And you'll see people who probably only have $50 in their account, give them $10. And I've seen a camera follow these people to a Mercedes Benz and then to some affluent neighborhood, you know. So, but a lot of people like, man, what? You know, why don't you do that? I'm like, I can easily see that person is scamming. Okay. And it amazes me that people can't see that. But I agree with Thomas here.
Giving money to the home. I mean, able-bodied men. I think one of the classic pictures to me, it was in San Francisco, when there was this able-bodied white man out in the street begging. And there's this black lady coming along there, very modestly dressed, like she didn't have, but she's stopping to open her purse to give him some money, you know. And I thought, good heavens, have we really come to this? And we've been brainwashed by the anointed into thinking this is what we ought to do.
You know, a strong man standing there asking for money, you know, because he doesn't want to get a job.
What do you say to guys who bum money off of you?
Not all of it can be repeated on the air, but the fact is they don't get any money.
They don't.
And people who complain now about all these people begging in the street, there's a simple answer. Don't give them money, and they won't be in the street.
When you wrote this, what were you trying to accomplish with the book, and did you do it? Were you nailing liberals for 30 years of social policy? What were you trying to say?
I was trying to reveal the thinking behind that, the kinds of assumptions, the kind of world that exists inside their mind, and therefore why those assumptions are so dangerous in the long run. It's not just the policies mentioned in that
They
book.
think they're better than everybody else.
Oh, absolutely. There's no question. And that's what makes them dangerous. Even all the policies that are mentioned there, 20 years from now, those policies may not be the policies we're concerned about. But that mindset will still be there. And what makes them tremendously dangerous is that facts that contradict what they believe are simply ignored or evaded.
Where does the press fall into this as the anointed group? Are they part of the anointed?
Oh, absolutely. They're a major part of it, because one of the reasons that people don't get many of the facts that go against what's believed is that the press doesn't choose to publicize those facts.
Give me an example of something the press might not cover or cover well.
Oh, a few years ago, there was a story about
who owns the press.
Is that the press doesn't choose to publicize those facts.
Give me an example of something the press might not cover or cover well.
Oh, a few years ago, there was a story about prenatal care among blacks, that black women get less prenatal care than white women. The infant mortality rate is higher among blacks. They immediately assume that one causes the other. Now, one of the things I like to do is go back to the original source and find out what it said. I went back. On the very same page where it said that, the figures showed Mexican Americans get even less prenatal care than blacks, and they have a lower infant mortality rate than whites. So prenatal care and infant mortality rate have nothing to do with each other. If you break it down further, black women who have only a high school education, but who are married, their children have lower infant mortality rates than white women who have a college education, who are unwed mothers. So it's not race, it's not income, it's not education, it's lifestyle. When you live a certain way, there are consequences to that. To me,
and when it comes to stats like that, you know, I wonder if Mexican people are more prone to have kids at a younger, healthier age versus like American women may have, you know, they're taught to wait like in their 30s, some of them, even 40s or late 20s, which is a higher risk the older you get versus, and I wonder if cultural differences also has something to do with the infant mortality rate, because in American, girls are taught to have fun in their 20s and kicking and stuff like that. And then, you know, they try to have a kid when they're like in their 30s and things of that nature. So I think that that's going to have higher numbers in infant mortality, but, you know, I'm just throwing it out there. I'm not an expert in this.
It doesn't want to accept that, because if you say people's lifestyles have a lot to do with the outcome, then there's no room for the anointed.
The anointed. Okay. Wow. Well, yeah, that's what I got for you guys today. I'm curious to know, you know, what your thoughts are of this video. You know, I'm never stuck on one set of ideology or the way I think. I'm always open to a difference of opinion, but hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, do me a big favor and like the video. If you want to stay up to date whenever I post, subscribe and hit that notification bell. And I appreciate you guys for watching.